Let's see here. Did everyone enjoy lunch? All right, I did too. I ate the same thing that I ate yesterday at Finn Hall. It was a Cuban sandwich. And when I tell you that thing was so good, we went back and I ate it again today. So I think I'm done eating for like 6 days because maybe not 6. Anyways, well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are super excited to have you back for lunch. Everyone having a good time. Any aha moments? Anybody feel like, raise your hand if you've had an aha moment today. A little bit? Okay, couple. Okay. Raise your hand if you felt like I've picked up a good resource, maybe tool, maybe practice. All right. Yeah. Okay. So that's good. It's practical, right? I appreciate that. So now, as we are heading into the rest of our afternoon, here we are going to be doing a panel, Trauma to Triumph panel featuring Casondra Burkley, Tiffany White, and Jamie Wright. And then I presume everybody who's coming in here is for this one, but if anybody else was looking for the other breakout rooms, we have Sustainable Self-Care Therapy 101 workshop with Dr. Bianca Jones and Dr. Huddleston. That's going to be in breakout room 1. And then in the TV room, where was the TV room? I got to look at the map. There's a grief talk circle, Mourning the Living with Darian and Shelzy. I think that is TV room down that way. Oh, it's at capacity. Well, y'all are supposed to be here anyways. I was just letting you know what might be going on in case you wanted to change your mind, but you're here. So now let me go ahead and introduce our wonderful guests. First, we have Casondra Burkley. All right, there's Casondra giving me the eye contact. Here, you take this microphone and you sit there. All right, and then I'll use this microphone over here. Right there. All right, Casondra. Okay, this is not on. Let me work it out, y'all. Let me work it out. Mic check. Okay, Casondra Burkley. You smell amazing. Casondra is a published author, playwright, pastor, poet, and licensed clinical social worker with over 17 years of experience working with children and families. She is a living example of conquering the obstacles of painful experiences, and it is an acronym, COPE, C-O-P-E. All right, next coming to the stage, Tiffany White. She is a Chicago native. South Side, stand up. South Side, West Side, where you at? South Side, okay, 63rd. I used to live in Chicago like 13. See, audience, y'all get to know me, okay? You know all of my addresses. Anyways, Tiffany holds a master's in public administration and is in the process of obtaining a master's in clinical mental health. As a new young adult cancer survivor and a history in nonprofit development, Tiffany started Time's Up Productions, a company dedicated to wellness, love, and peace. Hair is looking good, girl. They laid that, okay. You know, got me wanting to get my hair long. All right, and then next, is that Jamie? Just Jamie, all right. Come on down, Jamie. Happy Saturday. Jamie, and then you'll take this microphone once I'm all done. But Jamie is an award-winning resilience and encouragement speaker, activist, coach, and domestic violence survivor. She founded Jamie R. Wright, LLC, with a mission to provide survivor-led awareness, education, and empowerment to Black communities impacted by domestic violence. Jamie proudly serves on the board of directors for the Houston Area Women's Center, Unsilenced Voices, and as a member of the Coalition for the Homeless, the Way Home Continuum of Care Steering Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for your esteemed panel.
You want to start?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all today. As she mentioned, I'm Casondra Burkley, the CEO for Conquering the Obstacles of Painful Experiences. I will share more about that, but just a general introduction. I specialize in trauma. EMDR trained, TFCBT trained, really focused in helping people overcome their own life troubles and struggles, just based on my own experiences. And I'll tell a little bit more about that later, but how I got into the field. But happy to be here and excited. Hope y'all have some questions, and we definitely have some things that we'll share as well.
I'm not going to regurgitate what's already said. Happy Saturday. I am honored, y'all, to be in community with y'all. I look forward to, people having the courage to ask us the hard questions. Because I feel like that's why this is a quote unquote panel. So me and my sisters can come to you, meet you where you are, and not assume that we know what you need. So happy Saturday. I'm grateful to be here.
Got it. This is my first time in Houston, and I've been to Dallas, and I've been all over the world. This is my first time in Houston, so I am. Thank you. So I lived in Guam as a kid, so like my dad was in the Navy, so like I'm used to the humidity, but I was like Texas humidity is a little so different. But yeah, thank you for having me. I think that it is an honor to always talk about like what you've been through and like the healing journey, and yeah, I'm here to just help support and tell my story a little bit.
Do y'all have any initial questions?
Or do we want to just jump into?
I say just jump into it. There's all kinds of sessions going on. So for me personally, I'm kind of curious to know, why our sessions? What's your expectation? What would you like to get out of this time that we have the honor of being here together with each other? Anybody, somebody?
Or we can do where we can just say a little bit about our story. So my trauma story, I think it stems from just being a lot of trauma, actually. I think that Black women hold a lot of trauma. And so outside of me just beating cancer prior to, I had uterine cancer. So it went from stage 1 to stage 3 in the matter of 7 months. And I was misdiagnosed. And of course, it's because I was Black. And then I lost a son at the same time I had uterine cancer. And so in the result of that, now I cannot have children. And I had 6 surgeries, a stroke, radiation. I had a heart attack a couple months ago. And I'm 30. But also just growing up, I'm a product of child sexual abuse, domestic violence. I've been in domestic abuse relationships. And that kind of laid me down to my own healing journey and being like, okay, I'm tired. And how do I heal? And I think that is the beauty of healing is that it's not a linear journey. It's a journey that is continuous because you're always going to have trauma. You're going to trauma and triggers. But how do you navigate that space of okay, this happened. And I think to me, the after healing is the hard part, because you're in survival mode. So I use cancer as an example. My friend, this is my best friend here. I was perfectly fine during cancer. It sounds crazy. I was numb, doctors, had 6 surgeries. I'm fine. And then after cancer, I was like, how do you be normal human being again? But also being into mental health, normal is subjective. And what is normal? Mm-hmm. And is there such thing as normal? And so that has kind of been the continuous journey of as I heal, as I inspire others, is healing isn't just one way. It's not this euphoric experience. It is a very dark experience, sometimes a very dark place. And sometimes to heal, you have to go to that dark place to be better.
That's good.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about my trauma story. So born and raised in Houston, raised by a single mom, went through poverty, severe poverty, living in shelters, the whole thing. When I was 16, my house was broken into and I was raped by a stranger that broke into my home. My older sister was there at the time in the back room. And basically didn't come out, didn't say anything. So had to work through that whole, blame, why didn't you do anything? It probably could have been avoided, that type of thing. Went to Texas Children's, rape kit, all those things. Several years passed. This happened in 1995. I got a call from the Houston Police Department 15 years after the rape. Basically telling me that my rape kit was one of thousands of rape kits that sat in a room for over 10 years untested. Wow. Got that call to find out that they finally tested the rape kit and it came back with a match. So I had to go down to the police department. They brought out pictures from the room, from the door being kicked in. Basically had to relive that whole story all over again. He ended up being in jail for another rape and pled guilty to my rape and got an additional 25 years. And so that is where cope comes from, conquering the obstacles of painful experiences. It is me being a living, breathing, walking example of trauma to triumph, taking what I have gone through to help other people overcome, to be a living example that you can use your obstacles as stepping stones to greatness, that you can experience trauma and still live beyond it and walk in a place of healing and being whole. And so my premise today is really just the encouragement of whatever we've experienced, whether you've experienced trauma or you're working with individuals with trauma, really encourage people to tell their story. Yeah. There is healing in speaking about what you have gone through and what you've overcome. And it's not always easy. I didn't always talk about it like this, right? There was times I'm like, and then it happened, and then, and I still have those moments. Sometimes those emotions will just well up in me, but telling your story is so powerful, and I use my story to help other people know that they can overcome.
That was beautiful.
Beautiful. So super quick about my story, y'all. I came to Houston by way of Dallas in Southeast Oklahoma. I thought for love. I met a guy, swept me off my feet, was an ordained minister, all the things, right? I thought for the first time in my life that I was going to experience love, despite battling with depression and battling with child sexual abuse and all the things, coming home pregnant the first time at 13 years old. By the time I was 19, I had been pregnant 4 additional times. So when this tall, dark, super handsome guy came up to me and swept me off my feet in Dallas in 2018, I'm like, wow, this is it. And so in 2020, right before the pandemic, I moved from Dallas here to Houston, not knowing a soul, y'all, but just knowing that I was going to live this amazing life with this ordained minister. We was going to do all the things in the church and all of that. And 3 months after I got here, I was homeless at the Houston Area Women's Center. He hit me in the face and knocked my teeth loose. Wow. And so for the last 4 years, I've been on this unapologetic journey to, like my sisters are saying, being intentional about my healing journey and showing people, especially people that come from historically marginalized communities like myself, like many of us, and underrepresented people. I come from Oklahoma, so I come from a very rural part of the United States that we have an option, right? When we choose to surround ourselves with good people and in good places, that we can overcome any obstacle that life throws our way. So when I say that I'm honored to be in community with you all, I know the Creator has preserved me so that, like my sisters, we can be walking, living testaments of like life is a biatch, right? But we can turn that into whatever it is, that we choose to make it come. In some of the practical things that I'm doing now, I did have the honor of serving on the Houston Area Women's Center's board. Who does that, right? At the same shelter that they were at. Anybody? Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Anybody watch this TV show called House Hunters that come on HGTV? I was on it. Did you?
Look, that's her.
I was on it a couple of years ago, and they covered my story of overcoming homelessness and being able to buy a house. And now I have the audacity to think that I can build 2 $4.2 million projects to provide housing to survivors of domestic violence in Southeast Oklahoma and here in Houston.
Yes, hallelujah. Yes.
So that's me, y'all. That's me.
Yeah. But I think that, like, to your point about like telling your story, I think that one thing that we don't realize is telling your story takes a lot of, like, it goes to a dark place sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're telling something that, like, you sometimes haven't tapped into. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I don't always use cancer as like I think the cancer was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it wasn't the camel, right? Because it was child sexual abuse. I got raped in college from a football player. My family, I come from a long history of generational trauma. I lost a son at the time I got uterine cancer. And so that is like, I didn't think that I would be doing what I'm doing now. So I started this productions company and about like telling stories. And I'm releasing my first documentary in the next few weeks, really, with other young adult cancer survivors, with the hospitals in Chicago. And I never thought that I would be doing what I'm doing now. And so, like, but I think that to the point of being whole is subjective. Being whole is this idea that you have to be perfect. And I think as Black women or people of color, we have this notion to be twice as be twice as good to like achieve something. And we struggle with that anxiety, that depression, that insecurity, that continuous cycle of like, am I good enough? And I think for me, what I struggled with the most was like, am I worthy of any of this? And so like in the last, like, let's say 6 months, I got inducted to the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. This is my third panel in the last like 6 months. My documentary, it's been all these like amazing and beautiful things. But now I'm like in the back of my head, am I worthy of this because of the trauma? And so I think that like this idea, like triumph after trauma is like, yeah, you triumph, but that trauma still there. And for me, I was like, I carried it as a luggage, right? I always compared it as an airport. I love to travel all the time, but it was a luggage for me. And so I went to therapy for the first time, like 7 years ago. And I was like, I want to be healed. And she was like, what does that mean? I was like, I don't want to feel pain. And she was like, that's not real. And then I was like, okay, so what are you saying? And she was like, well, we're going to work like, how do you heal? How do you deal with your trauma, but like acclimate back into society? Because similar to a lot of our stories, it's like you have these traumatic events, but how do I like live again? And I think that like our old person dies so many times. And if we know about trauma, it rewires your brain. So each time you're like not functioning properly. And so I know for me, like it's not easy to tell your story. I think that's why I started my productions company, to tell these stories of like everybody. Because my story is not it's not the only story that needs to be told. Mm-hmm. But it is a story that like should be told. But it's scary.
And I'll piggyback on that. You know, I think it's so important for us to know that as we go through these different situations, it's all a part of it's like a puzzle being put together. You know, it's puzzle pieces. And as we tell our story, it just empowers us. I think often when we go through different experiences, especially when I'll speak from my own experience of people coming to me for therapy. It's like, okay, I came to therapy, I took this step, now fix me, right?
That's right. That's
you know, it's like, fix me. And if you're good enough, when I leave here, I'm no longer gonna experience what I'm experiencing. Right. And that's just not reality. The reality is, you know, that trauma, that experience is still there. It's just the impact is changed, right? Mm-hmm. The triggers don't impact you as much anymore. The voices, the sounds, the songs, the smells, they don't impact you as much. And I think it's important for us to make sure we encourage people to take the pressure off, feeling like everything is just going to be perfect and fixed, right? Yep. Right? And knowing that even as clinicians, even as storytellers, even as presenters and panelists and all these different things, we're still all putting the puzzle pieces together. Mm-hmm. Always. Like it's a never ending puzzle almost.
For sure. Oh, no, yes. No, it's definitely a journey, y'all. I tell people I'm an unapologetic believer of Jesus Christ. And it's not to walk around like I'm better than you. It's because the trauma that I've experienced, this flesh will have me 2 decisions away from hell and jail at any given time. And so I've learned to give myself grace, right? To give myself grace because it is, and it's all making sense. It's like, oh, that's why that had to happen, for this to happen and for that to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So I hear some of you guys mention like you saw your life going one way. Did you have to face like a period of resistance of like, okay, yes, these things happen to me, but I am resisting being an ambassador for overcoming trauma because I had a different vision for how my life is going. So was there ever a resistance or a pull and tug on the call to do this work versus what you pictured for your life? And how did you get past it?
You act like that's past. Look, I'm resisting it now.
Look, I almost didn't come. Okay, so you look, we are, you want to go? You want me? Look. I almost didn't make it. Okay. So that resistance is like, it's never ending. I did not think it was the pieces out there was about like, I am chosen. Right. And we were talking about that it's a gift and a curse. So it's this resistance of like, am I good enough for this? Or like my family, and this is just true story. I will always be as honest as I can. My family hates that I talk about the trauma. My family does not support me. I remember going like, I'm going to go to school, get a second master's degree in clinical mental health. My mom says, don't go around diagnosing us, right? And so like everything that I've done this far, I didn't have support for this. My support has been my friends, or God, to be honest. And so like And then my own resistance. I have PTSD from all of the trauma that I've had. I didn't realize during cancer, they discovered I have a brain disorder where my brain and my body are not connected. And so that resistance is still like here right now in this space. I was like, am I okay to do this right now? Like, am I good? And so like, I think that like, if I had to give some advice to that is just like, give yourself grace because it's never ending to that resistance.
And I'll just like 2 practical things that I have to work through because I navigate the imposter syndrome. And when the creator puts me in the room with these super smart people, y'all, that have like these Congress people and all that. 2 practical things that I do. When I was at the shelter, y'all, I asked God, I said, Lord, if you help me navigate one of the most darkest things next to losing my mom when she was 47 years old to cancer, literally watching her die. If you help me navigate this, I promise you that I will live the rest of my days showing the goodness of who you are. And my second practical thing, so I remember like, oh, Jamie, you made a commitment to God. Now, he didn't ask you to make that commitment. So it's not about you, beautiful little girl. It's about the others that you are assigned to touch. And the second practical thing, y'all, when I came home pregnant at 13, my grandmother told me, she said, when the community threw me away, right? Nobody focused on why I was promiscuous, right? They focus on what? I was walking around 13 years old with a baby in my tummy. My grandmother said, you won't be the first and you won't be the last, but what you will do is raise this child. I lost my grandmother last May. She's an ancestor now. And so in addition to honor my commitment to the creator, I want to live to make my grandmother proud. So when I don't want to do the thing and when I'm pushing up against the resistance, I remind myself of those 2 commitments that I made. Because one thing that I've learned that y'all might consider taking out of the room is we have to learn how to not break commitments to ourselves. Yeah. Some of us are so apt to make, I told such and such I was going to be at brunch at 11. I'm going to go, right? But when we say I'm going to come to Houston, Texas, and I'm going to push through, oftentimes we give ourselves permission to break the commitment to ourselves. So I hope that makes sense, love.
And I was going to say my resistance is not in the what, but in the how. It is in, so I know I'm called to this. I know it happened for a reason. I know I'm supposed to be the ambassador, but how it happens is the resistance. Like, I want it to happen this way, right? And those aren't the doors that are opening. The doors that are opening are on, this other way. And so I have had to wrestle with okay, how is the story going to be told? Where is it going to be told? And what platforms? So that has been the part that I have had to struggle with the most.
So I have a question. So a part of Build, we've been pushing this narrative. Build is a nonprofit on the West Side, I'm a LCSW. We believe in 99% trauma, like you are 99% of your trauma and 1% healing. So my question to you guys is, what is that 1% that keeps you going, that screws your healing?
The 1% that keeps me going is seeing other people heal. I vividly remember the first time I ever told anybody outside of my circle that I had been raped. I was in the student union building at Baylor University, my sophomore year, I believe it was. And a friend of mine came up to me in the middle of the student union building. It's hundreds of people around. And she just collapsed in my chest crying. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? She said, I was raped last night. This is in the middle of the student union building. And so I knew in that moment that was the reason that I had to do what I'm doing now. So that is the 1% that pushes me when I see other people begin to come out to tell their story and see them go through their healing journey.
Anybody familiar with the term epigenetics? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the ones that are not is a study that shows that trauma literally shifts our DNA. And when that came across my learning, I was like, OMG, it made sense to like why like my like some of the things my grandmother did and didn't do, and some of the things that my mom did and didn't do. So my 1%, y'all, is to take the knowledge that I know now and be intentional about shifting it. I'm a 44-year-old, and I like to say in a modest way, a fine grandma. Y'all, I have 2 grandbabies at 44 years old.
Wow.
Right? And so as as I'm leaning into that, I'm like, y'all, like our parents and our forefathers, they didn't have Chat GPT. They didn't have these communities. I mean, some of the times they were happening, but they had a cost to it that, we couldn't take off work and, afford to pay to attend. But anyway, now that I know, it's like now I'm responsible for being intentional about shifting the narrative. So that's my 1%. I will not on my watch, not my grandbabies, not anybody that's attached to me is going to navigate through this one life we have to live with all this shame and guilt and wouldas and shouldas, the trauma that gets trapped in our body and oftentimes manifests with, cancer and all these other things. So I say it loud and I say it proud everywhere I go. I am a survivor of domestic violence and childhood sexual abuse. And I just start to tell whatever it is that I'm there to, even if I'm selling cucumbers, I'm going to lead the conversation with that, right?
I think my 1%, just a little bit more about me. They say with the cancer analogy, right? So at the time I got cancer, I was vegan and I work out a lot. And so every time I got questioned about cancer, it was like, what were you eating? What were you doing? And I was like, I was at my healthiest, but I was also at my most stressed. And so this 1% that I think that I have now, it's a 1% that is still developing, because it is days where I want to give up. It is days when you put yourself in the spotlight of telling your story, you are open to criticism, to critiques. You're open to you're living your life. Let's say, for instance, for my cancer, I still live this very interesting life. I travel, I do all of this. And then you get this criticism. Well, you had cancer, you should be doing this. I'm in menopause at 30. You should be at home, right? And so this 1% is okay, I told my story, but my story isn't for me. And so I think that oftentimes I want to give up to 99%, because 99% does take over sometimes. You're like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. But it is because I get to inspire others to tell their story. I get to have people DM me and be like, I would not tell my story if it wasn't for you. In my documentary, one of my survivors, she has cervical cancer, and she never told her story before. And she's a psychologist, everything, never told her story. And I cried. And now I'm directing, and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be crying. But she was like, I told my story because you told yours. And so I was like, I had one of my survivors. He is 22 with a very rare leg cancer. And he's a leg amputee. And I was like, why do you tell your story on the documentary? He said, because you told yours. And so that 1% is to keep going for the next generation. I think that trauma is a continuous cycle for all of us, right? It's because trauma happens, it keeps happening. But my 1% is God he didn't keep me here, right? Because I could have committed suicide, I could have gave up, I could be in a psych ward, I could be doing anything. But I have to keep going because now I'm now responsible for ensuring that people that look like me have a platform. So yeah, I think that answers the question of that 1%. Yeah. Go ahead.
First, I want to thank you for sharing your stories. But my question is, have you ever encountered someone who tries to minimize your trauma? Like you say, they might say, I went through the same thing, it's not that bad, or I went through it and I'm still alive. How did you handle that?
My mama. My mama, my grandma, my family. My family has a history of sexual abuse, domestic violence, all these things that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to bring it up, right? I'll give you a great example. My brother is bipolar schizophrenic and tried to kill me twice. 2-3 years ago, I was homeless for a little minute. And even to this day, my mom will be like, well, I was beat on and raped as a kid. This isn't that bad. And it's an interesting parallel, right? Because mom's my best friend, but I got my best friend telling me that my trauma doesn't matter because she went through this. And so I think that that is I don't have a concrete answer because I'm still struggling with it. It happens to this day. This is a last week thing. And I'll give you, I love great examples. They're gonna be mad if they see this, but I don't care anymore. I don't. I'm not gonna lie. I just don't care anymore. Cause like, whatever. I hosted a wellness. I hosted a fitness boot camp, and then my church, I did a panel about cancer survivors, right? And my grandma was like, "Why are you doing that?" And I was like, "Okay, here we go again. Here we go. But it's this constant like notion of like, your trauma is. I've been to this, I've been to that. And you don't really, it's hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's like, it's sad. You go, because then you're like, am I supposed to be doing this? Is my trauma not that bad? And you can't compare trauma. I think that's, people like do this thing of like, even with, and I use cancer as my great example. I didn't have chemo, right? But my best friend had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer at 31, her second time with cancer. And as she was taking care of me, I'm watching her go through chemo. And I'm like, I'm in my head like, well, my cancer wasn't that bad. But then we talk about our stories. I'm like, so I can go through what you've been through, but I couldn't deal with what you're going through. And so I think for me, I've had to navigate it and be like, trauma is trauma. And it's no scale or no spectrum on like whose trauma is greater. And so when they do try to minimize it, it's like, no, my trauma does matter. Yep. And so does yours. Yep.
I'm gonna try my very best to unpack this because something just powerfully just came up for me. So I would recommend considering therapy, prayer, and leaning into that still small voice. Mm-hmm. Some of us call it the Holy Spirit, but the inner voice. And you'll with a really good therapist and prayer and learning to listen to that still small voice, it'll hurt, but like the things it'll hurt, but not so much that it'll knock you down to keep you down. And I'm gonna give you your flowers while you're alive. So I shared with y'all, my mom passed from cancer at 47, right? On her deathbed, she shared with me that her uncle had molested her for years. And when she told my grandmother said, don't tell anybody because your grandpa will kill him. That was his brother. Well, fast forward, what just came up for me, had this young lady been around when my mama was around, and gave my mama the tools to start to share her story, maybe, just maybe, the cancer that she could have overcome, it maybe wouldn't have manifested in her body to damage her kidneys to die at 47 years old. So I share that to say, you might get the naysayers, but if with a good therapist, you cry and do all the things, and that's what the Creator designed you to do, is to share your story in ways that will start to impact others so we can get true deliverance. Listen, them people are not going to they're not going to be like when the Creator say, why did you not unpack the gift I gave you in the world? They're not going to be sitting there talking about da-da-da-da. You're going to have to answer for that. Yeah. There's somebody waiting for all of us. We are the medicine to every single person's pain. And if we, like my mom died with all kinds of gifts and talents inside of her. I tell people, especially when I'm back home in Oklahoma, all I am is my mom with the freedom to unpack my trauma, the power and all that. That's all I am is her. So just think about it like that. Like, because you choose not to share in the way that the Creator designed you to share, somebody's life might be negatively impacted. So I want to give you your flowers while I'm sitting here next to you. Thank you. Thank you, love.
Thank you. I think it's also important to make sure we equip ourselves with the tools to communicate, to be authentic, right? To be able to stand firm and bold, flat-footed. There are going to be some people, including our parents, because when you say mom, I'm like, oh, yes, including our parents, that we may have to stand up to. And say, hey, that may not be your experience, but this is my experience. And you are not going to take my experience from me. You're not going to minimize it. You're not going to demean it. You're not going to belittle it. This happened to me. I experienced it this way. There was a situation, my sister, my biological dad attempted to molest my sister. And so my sister posted, this was maybe a year ago, my sister posted on social media, I survived, being abused, I survived. So from her perspective, she was abused. He said things to her. He tried to touch her. She was abused, right? So I'm having a conversation with my mom, and my mom's like, did you see what your sister put on social media? And I'm like, no, I didn't. What was it? And so she said she was abused. And I said, well, that's her perspective. If that's what she felt was abuse, then that was abuse. She wasn't abused. So I'm literally going at bat. It wasn't me, but it was for my sister to say, you don't have the right to define what was abuse and what was trauma for her. If that's how she felt, that's how she felt. And there was a time I would have never said that to my mom because I was so afraid to speak up because we were taught, you don't talk. You are there to be seen, not heard, right? And so I think it's so important for us to equip ourselves to learn how to be bold, courageous in our voices and stand firm in what we have experienced and not let anyone take that from us.
Sometimes you have to love folks from a distance.
Yeah,
Love,
very
like,
true.
I'm,
Yes.
Okay, look.
I'm literally like, I love everybody with the love of Christ, but I'm learning that everybody don't get access to the core of who I am and the core of who the Creator's called me to be. Because I can't carry that and then carry the load of my assignment at the same time. Now, I tell people, is this being recorded? I tell people now, when I get to the upper room, I might have to, God might question me about fornicating, but he ain't going to question me about unpacking my gift in the world.
Look, I told my friend, I said, look, Jesus, now look, I'm gonna talk to the head HR angel in charge. Now I know it's a list I done did, okay, but look at the good stuff, right? Like put me in heaven. But what I'm hearing is boundaries. So what I've learned in therapy, so when you go through abuse or you go through trauma, you're a people pleaser sometimes, right? Or you child sexual abuse, hypersexuality. Yep. No one talks about that, right? Yes. No one talks about like being raped or being abused and like being promiscuous. And I can use my own experience. I didn't for a long time correlate sex with like this love experience because I was introduced to it at a very young age. But now I've been in therapy for like 7 years and also becoming a therapist. Boundaries, right? Boundaries are like boundaries aren't for no one else, they're for you. So like my boundaries, even with my own family, I take them in doses. Like I come around when I want to come around. My last Thanksgiving, this is a true story. My mother called me the B word and day before Thanksgiving, right? And I was like, okay, got it. I won't be there. I'm going to sit in my house. I watched a documentary. I ate a salad for Thanksgiving, drank me some wine, and I had a blast. And I had like some me time. I had some real me time. And I think that like that's something that I've like tried to implement is like boundaries. Because like when you do go through trauma or you do go through all these things, and as people of color, as Black women, I think that we are so accustomed to like bending over backwards for the world. Mm-hmm. And we don't do that for ourselves. So like, figure out what your self-care is. Figure out what your like your hobbies are, right? Because like sometimes our hobbies are like, I'm gonna work and I'm gonna be successful, and that's a hobby. It's not really a hobby. Find your self-care. Find what you like to do outside of like your job or like, something like that. And that's been my journey. It's like I like to pick flowers. That's something I want to always continue to do. Yeah, but you have a question, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to just acknowledge all of your courage and appreciate your love for yourself and the love that you are emanating to all of us and to, spreading that and doing that healing work for the rest of the community. I can relate very much to a lot of what y'all have shared in your own experiences. And as the longer that I live and the more people that I know, I see that so many of us have gone through so much of similar types of traumas. It's almost completely 100%, Yeah. And so my questions to y'all is one, is continue on the answer that Tiffany was just giving about the what are your self-care, the best self-care activities that y'all do, and also, are y'all individually, or do y'all know of anybody collectively that is, besides this conference also, that is trying to get the help and therapy and whatever types of different modes of therapy that our peoples need, the global majority that have been oppressed with colonization for 500 plus years, and that's ongoing also. To make it more accessible and to break down those barriers for our people to start getting the therapy that they need.
What's your name, King?
My artist name is Inspire. My real name is Eddie Garcia.
Mr. Eddie, I want to acknowledge you. I will not step over the fact that there is a handful of men in here. So I want to honor you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Flowers. Yeah.
Thank you. So I've started what in its trademark is called Men Too Movement. So I recognize through this work, a handful of men have come up to me and told me stories that blew me backwards. It made me understand that as a woman, I've had a platform to share my trauma, but there's just as many, 1 in 6 men, y'all, these are stats. So in my job, I'm an analyst. 1 in 6 men have been, then this one's courageous enough to share, has been sexually misused. 1 in 6 and 7 men are experiencing domestic violence. And so I started a Men Too movement to create community so that you all as men, especially men of color, can find safe spaces like this with your peers so that you can be the man that the Creator called you to be. Because what I recognize through dating a whole lot of y'all is that is that hurt people, okay. Right? So even the man that knocked my teeth loose, he was hurting. Right. And it's because he's not been given a chance to go get that broken, scared 6-year-old little boy like I was given the chance to get this broken, scared 6-year-old little girl. And so I'm intentional about that. There's a gentleman. There's a gentleman. His name is Jay Barnett. He's out of Dallas, Texas. He has Bro Just Heal. If you follow me on social, I have a website, social, all the things, please DM me. And that goes for any man in here, y'all, because here's the thing, we need y'all. And ain't nothing like a good old strong back man of color. And I will not give up on y'all, even though all the drama I've ever experienced has been at the hands of a man of color. So DM me and I'll give you all the resources that I know, and maybe we can collaborate. I have people in California, Atlanta, and Lubbock that we're working on with the Men Too movement. Did anybody else?
Because you said something about, Aspire, you said something about like self-care, right? I think that like I had to learn what self-care was. Like, you don't know, we Black people and people of color, we don't know what self-care is, because you saw your mama work 99 hours a week. Your daddy might have not been there. If he was there, he was working. You know, like we didn't do nothing for self-care. And my self-care has been, since college has been like, I like to run, right? Church is crazy. Church is interesting. It's a safe place for me. But also my self-care is, my therapist will be like, are you going to watch a TV show and sit on this couch? And I was like, you know what? Hey, just be, because we're always moving. And sometimes like that is an issue that comes, like it's a trauma response. You got to be doing something all the time. And then when you're not doing something, you're like, okay, am I like doing something wrong? My self-care is, I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch Sex and the City. I'm going to watch Insecure. I'm going to watch TV and like just be alone. And so like, and as far as like men with mental health, me getting into the mental health field and working for nonprofits, that is what I push all the time in Chicago. My best friend here has her own practice with a Black man who has like, they are literally doing the work. Her nonprofit Build is doing the work to ensure that Black and brown communities and Black and brown men and young men have access to equitable mental health resources. And the nonprofit I worked for, that was the mission of that, is to just continue this restorative justice work, continue the work of like helping out young adults, men, any man, to come and get some help. I hope that answers your question.
You had a question?
How do we find the Men Too movement? I'm trying to find it and I can't spell it.
Yeah, we're collaborating. We're collaborating with it now. You won't find it online because we're literally working on it. The Creator just downloaded that in my spirit. So you can Jamie R. Wright. And if you have it, I mean, just DM me. And I'm looking for ideas. I can't do this alone. I just have a passion, and I know that it's supposed to be done. And who else to do it than somebody that's an advocate and known to be a survivor of domestic violence? And we will be using restorative justice practices. So DM me. I need help, y'all. Thank you.
Well, I know we got a couple minutes, but right here.
Hey, beautiful. Good to see you.
Thank you all for sharing. So very, very grateful. I'm curious as to how y'all were able to rebuild a connection with intimacy again, like what practices maybe were helpful or useful, and not just intimacy as far as sex, but even touch, you know, even like, you know, people being in close proximity, like how y'all were able to rebuild that relationship with that after your experiences?
That was tough for me. I've been married twice, divorced twice. It was after the last divorce that I realized that I was still carrying that. And so it's not enough time to go into it. You can DM me, we can talk more. But I will say therapy helped, right? I had to, when I was raped in high school, my mom said, well, you want to go to therapy? And I was like, absolutely no. I don't want to talk to anybody. It wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s, now 45. So that I went to therapy to help me process. I had to learn, and I hope this is not too much for this platform, but I had to learn in intimacy just how to relax.
Yeah.
How to receive my husband at the time. I didn't know how to do that. I thought I was doing it right. And it wasn't until I went to someone who specialized in sex therapy that helped me to understand you're still carrying this trauma in your body. Although you're walking, you're talking, you're praying, you're doing all these things, you're speaking, but it's still in your body. And so, short answer, I had to process that through therapy, even to learn just how to relax my body for intimacy.
And my short answer to like wrap up, I know we got to wrap up, is that like intimacy for me, it wasn't just sexual, right? I didn't like physical touch. I'm not a physical touch person. It wasn't until I went through cancer that I was like, I like quality time. And that's my intimacy, right? Like I like to just sit and people and exist in like our bodies, just in our space. And that's friends, family, anybody. And so like, I think that it's this journey of like intimate and also intimacy with myself. I was afraid of being alone and being by myself. And so that's kind of how I connected to it. Also therapy, God, but like really just sitting with myself and being like, okay, my body is this. Let's figure out how to be in this body and what feels safe to me. And safety and security is kind of how I learned how to reconnect with intimacy.
Safety, that's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Give them a round of applause.
Thank y'all.
Clap it up.